right, welcome to another episode of the IBC Guys. I'm Dave. Joining me, as always, is Mike. And if you're like me, you couldn't get enough of Tim Scheinder. So he's back by popular demand. We were inundated with calls and emails. I mean, I don't even have a Twitter, and I was getting tweets. Tim, get him back on. So we had to do it for everybody listening and watching. So he is back today. I will say this, Tim. I know what people can't get enough of, and it's your wife's cinnamon twist. So we haven't talked about that story. I was sent home from the fishing trip that we talked about last week with one of those things. It lasted all of 30 seconds once we tried it. So my kids, their eyes, maybe from the sugar too, but they just got real big because it was delicious and it was pretty much inhaled. So I don't know how that's going to manifest, but people can't get enough of MC's cinnamon twist. So if you ever get a chance, you got to try it. So I tend to rabbit trail, Tim. I'm sorry, man.
No,
But
I, I get it.
we got some topics to talk about today. With Tim back with us, I got to do the introduction stuff. So the IBC guys exists for three reasons. One is to get information out to you. So we want you to have an understanding so you can make a decision that's best for your family. That's first and foremost. Second, we want to give implementable and actionable ideas that you can take and put into what you're already doing. The question is not, can IBC fit into what I'm doing in my life? It's how. And that's where our desire lies, all three of us, is how can we help you understand how IBC can monetize money you're already spending. And then three is to get the word out, as spread as far out as we can. So if you would share, like, subscribe, do all the social media things. Um, I don't think Mike nor I has any idea how many followers we have. I like to think there's millions of listeners. I think that's a little unrealistic, as Mike likes to remind me. But I say all this because I know that it helps when people share and tell others about it. It just helps get the cause out, because the number one thing we do this for, is to get people a working knowledge of what this is. So we have a phone number, 507-205-2284. If you want to call in. My email is dave@familybankingsolutions.com, and Mike's is mike@familybankingsolutions.com. All right. The stuff is out of the way. Tim, I'm ready to sit back and listen. So I'm going to let Mike drive, and I'm going to maybe pipe in with a question or two here to learn from your expertise. But Mike, if you want to take it away, now's the time.
Yeah. So in our last podcast, when we were talking IBC with Tim, he had mentioned the fact, which and everyone mentions this, is that it's a constant learning process that takes. No one gets it right away. I mean, everyone takes months, let's just say. I mean, lots of time. Everyone's a little bit different, but it's such a foreign concept. It's different than what we've been taught, that it takes time to kind of wrap your mind around it. And then, as Tim mentioned in the last episode, that even though, I mean, it's been, you've been doing it for lots of time, months, years, whatever, your mind kind of switches back every now and then. And I think the reason that is, when you're looking at the IBC, the infinite banking concept, you're basically starting a family banking cash flow system. Obviously not a legitimate bank, brick and mortar in your city, but a banking system within your family. But you treat it and you run it like a bank. And I think the reason why it's you keep switching back, and I keep, everyone switches back because of this. When we're all taught, interest is bad, loans are bad, pay cash for everything, don't go in debt, debt's terrible, blah, 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 blah. Where if you go to the bank and you make a deposit, say you put in, $10,000 in the bank in a interest bearing savings account or CD or whatever, and the bank's going to pay you some interest. So as the depositor, customer of the bank, that is an asset to you. An asset is something that makes you money, and that money with interest is making you money. For the bank, that deposit is a liability to them. It's costing them money. they have to pay you interest. If they just leave it sit there and pay you an annual interest, they're going to lose money. They obviously turn around and take that and put it to work for in more, you know, better ways that we won't even get into, specifically fractional reserve banking. That's a whole nother deal. But it's a liability to them. So the same $10,000 deposit for the customer is an asset, and for the bank it's a liability. However, when that bank takes money and turns around and puts it to work in the form of a loan to another customer, that loan then becomes an asset to the bank that's making them money and a liability to the customer. So with every process, whether it's a deposit, it's an asset for one and a liability for another, or the loan, it's an asset for one and a liability for the other. So it's opposite. So we are so accustomed, I think, whether you're, I shouldn't even say school, but just growing up and talking with people. I mean, there's no financial literacy whatsoever in the school system today, in my opinion. I mean, very, very, very little. And we're just taught that, again, loans are bad and don't pay interest and blah, blah, blah. Whereas from a banking standpoint, those are all good things. So when you start your own family banking policy, you are both of those. You're both characters. You are the customer, the depositor, and you are the banker. So you play both roles, and it's very easy to kind of, I'm thinking about this one, oh geez, I think about this one, like on the truck example. Wow, well, geez, I'm paying the insurance company interest, like, oh, that's a terrible deal, but you forgot about the other side of it too. So a long explanation. I apologize if I went on a rant there. I just wanted to throw out the fact that I think it's very easy, very common. Everyone does it, to get into that where your mind reverts back and like, well, geez, I thought, man, I got a policy, or I got 2 or 3 policies, and I've read tons of books, and I think I really got a pretty good understanding of this. And then your mind goes back to, well, wait a minute. And then you're like, oh yeah. I was thinking of it like a customer. I wasn't thinking of it like a bank, because both of those thought processes are totally different. And you have to kind of analyze them both to see the overall benefit. So long explanation, but I think it's very common for people. I know, again, the last episode, Tim brought up that, yeah, geez, every once in a while, your mind kind of goes back to that. It happens to everybody. And I think that's the main reason why. So this is kind of a hard left here, but have we talked about the backwards bicycle on this podcast before?
We have not. So that's
okay. I think you guys have both seen it, right?
I have, yes, sir.
Yes. So you can go on YouTube and just search backwards bicycle experiment, something like that. And basically it's an engineer that designed the handlebars on like a reverse gear ratio. So when you turn the handlebars right, that the wheel actually goes right. I'm thinking right. You turn the handlebars to the left, the wheel goes right, and vice versa. So it's totally backwards. And your mind is programmed to only do things one way. And he basically proves this theory that he learns to ride this backwards bicycle. It takes him months to do. His son does it in a few days because his son hasn't been programmed 30 years more like his dad had. But the scientist finally learns to ride the backwards bicycle, unlearned the way he did it before, learned the new way, and goes around doing seminars really all over the world. And one day he's like, you know what? I wonder, I'm going to hop on a regular bicycle, and, because now my mind is trained. I've been doing it for so long, and he can't ride the bicycle. And everyone's heard of the cliche or whatever, like, oh, just like riding a bike, just hop right on. He literally couldn't do it because his mind was just, it's trained this way. It just can't do both. So again, kind of back to the banking, the IBC, the customer versus the banker, the depositor versus the lender. I mean, our brain has a very difficult time of, running parallel systems, if you will, like a computer. I mean, it gets locked into one and it just kind of can't think of the other. I think it's totally normal, happens to everybody, happens to me. I think it's perfectly normal.
I'll add, I mean, that the biggest point in that story to me is when he tried to go back and ride a normal bike. I'll parallel that. I'm not going to think of qualified plans, traditional banking the same way I used to. I can't. Like I physically, I can't mentally do that because I know what I know now. And I think that's an applicable, very appropriate example of once you get this, once you wrap your mind around it to the point of understanding, the benefits far outweigh anything else in existence. It's just hard to get yourself to that point, and I think that's the why you brought up the backwards bicycle. So yeah, I think it's a cool concept. Um, so yeah, I to go back to Mike or Tim's point last week, it just takes time, and I brought that up and asked him that question because I wanted to iterate again to the listener. I would ask them to be patient with themselves. Um, we've talked with several people that there's maybe some shame around financial literacy. I mean, I've lived it. I know, and Tim's nodding his head. He and I have talked about that in our own respective stories. So it just takes some time. So I would guess that people will be encouraged, and you'll get there. If we can, we'd like to help expedite that process, make it faster. Give us a call. Let us know how we can do that. So sorry, this is yours and Tim's podcast, Mike, and I
Well, this
commandeered
is
it. So
this
I
is
just
special
I got
guest Tim
shut up.
Scheinder part 2, and he hasn't said a word
He hasn't
yet.
said a word. Okay, these chuckleheads that are on here all the time need to be quiet. So
Hey,
let's ask Tim some questions.
hey, I'm just listening and learning along with everybody else. You brought up something, Dave, that I wanted to jump in on. Like that was one of the, 23 podcasts later. That's one of the things that I remember vividly was Melissa was on. You guys would know maybe, but 6, 7 episodes ago it feels like maybe it's been longer than that now even. But she said that word that you just said. She said there's shame around where people are at financially, whether it's how much debt they have or the circumstances they're in, or I think a lot of people feel like they're at a certain age they should be in a certain place, and I think that can be as crippling as not knowing in the first place is just comparing yourself to other people. So I also think kind of the not necessarily a reverse, but another sort of spin-off of that is people are proud of what they know too, and it's hard to bump somebody off the way they grew up or the friends they surround themselves with. I mean, we kind of all heard that thought process of like you are probably a pretty good average, even when it comes down to annual income. You're probably a pretty good average of the 5 people you hang around the most. Like that's just human nature, and I think we all have that tendency to think like what I know is as good as it gets. Like I'm a pretty smart cat when it comes to this stuff, and I know I'm at the pinnacle of knowledge as far as financial stuff goes. I mean, especially when you start to get into some of these concepts like we're talking about, IBC specifically. Like it's you feel like you're there, and certainly like I think we mentioned a little bit on the previous podcast is this is the best way I know of at the moment to be able to recapture that money that's leaving your family. You think about some of the examples to me are quite easy at this point, sort of thinking about that reverse bicycle. Like we talk about the vehicle thought process. We've talked about that so much that one's almost like ingrained in my mind. Like I couldn't think of any other way to even do that. Is the knowledge that, listen, I know that if I will use my policy correctly, 20 years from now, I'm going to have gone through 4 vehicles and I'm going to have all the money. I'm going to have every ounce of money that I ever paid for any of them in an account that's like, Dave's word is on the ledger. It's still going to be on the ledger and be there for my family, potentially until I pass away, and potentially in if everything goes correctly, and things are set up in a proper way, even further. So that's an easy one to me. The ones that can throw me off as examples are, or at least are harder to wrap your head around, are vacations, or I think we talked about property taxes and things like that, things that go in and out of your checkbook. That's a little bit more difficult to understand because it's not necessarily a segment of time that you're going to set aside for, I'm going to capitalize this policy for 5 years, then I'm going to start buying vehicles, and it's every 5 years, and I know the dollar amount, and that all works out perfectly. Where some of these other bills can get bigger in the amount of time you need to set that policy up in a specific way, and understand all that. And thinking again about, for instance, vacations. There's 87 different ways to pay for that. You could, is it better if you, put that money in a savings account and have it grow for a certain amount of time than just having it in a shoebox at your house? I mean, you will have gained something. It's certainly like a better level to have set the money aside and not borrow it, for instance, like not put it on a credit card and pay 25% interest. But what if, you could have that money in an account that was growing for the next, however long your life, ends up being, um, while also being able to go on that vacation and being able to just pay that back, and that money was growing the entire time, as if you never went on the vacation. Like it's a little bit harder to consider things like that. I think for most people that, that's a different thought process. So, uh, but those are the things that actually excite me, is the littler things, the more mundane things that we can now, monetize, and continue to put all the money together. And like I spoke a little bit about it in the last podcast, like realizing that the more the more you wish that you had more of your life, falling through these IBC policies.
Man, Mike, should we just name this the Tim Scheinder podcast and call it good?
Sounds
I
good.
mean,
That's a terrible
let's
idea.
let's do it. Yeah. I'll be the guy that introduces and then let you go, Tim. Maybe our plan. But
I'll tell you something here that I've been thinking about since we kind of started talking about this. Is like, I'm the guy that's never, I literally had to I had to go onto YouTube and look and see what you guys were wearing in any podcast leading up to this, because I literally have never watched it before. Dave, if we wouldn't have gone fishing, I still wouldn't know what you look like. But I've listened to every podcast, some of them 2 or 3 times, so I would have known what you sound like. But here's what I was afraid of, is that, like, we're gonna get on here, and I know there's a multiple of ways to consume this podcast. One of them being YouTube. I was afraid people were gonna pop on with the three of us and think that they'd stumbled upon some sort of like men's modeling or fitness
yeah,
podcast.
yeah. Well, let's save people the trouble and say that's not the case. I was gonna even say that before you mentioned that. Like, you don't want to go on to YouTube and see what I look like.
Yeah,
I think, yeah,
and if you do go on YouTube, you'll know why that's funny.
yeah.
Well,
That's a
well,
great
I got to
point.
say, for the ladies out there, if you've never seen Tim Scheinder,
Ooh,
like, it
baby.
may be worth you hopping on YouTube for this one episode. If you consume it on Spotify or Apple driving to work, this is the one you may want to go.
When they say men age like fine wine, there's a picture of Tim Schneider sitting right next to that statement. A little salt and pepper, nice haircut going.
It's not real.
He's looking sharp tonight.
They are catfishing you something terrible right now.
So, Mike, did you have any other questions for Tim? I know we wanted to have him back for some specific reasons.
Well, so Tim, tell me what, I know we've had some discussions on what you just mentioned earlier on, the car example, because financing a truck, most people are familiar with, 95+% people go in and finance a vehicle. They know, I want to go in, I want to get a truck, I'm going to get a loan, 60 months, I'm going to pay some interest, I'm using the bank's money, using Ford Credit's money, whoever's money, you're using someone else's money, and there's a cost to that. And yeah, I'm going to go then and pay that back over 5 years. I mean, everyone understands that concept. When you get into paying cash for something, it could be for the truck. It could be like you mentioned, Tim, a vacation or whatever, taxes, whatever. People don't understand that concept of what do you mean I got to pay that back? I save up $2,500 to pay, let's say, property taxes, and then I write that check, and I've already saved the money up. I've already paid the bill. Well, what do you mean I gotta pay myself that back? Well, yeah, because you got to pay it again next year. Or groceries, you put $500 in your checkbook and go to the grocery store. Or in my case, feeding 3 college age boys, it's way more than $500 in the checkbook to go to
Yeah.
the grocery store multiple times a month.
It's like a night out at dinner for you guys.
Yeah. So I mean, I've never said, no one has ever said, okay, I put $500 in my checkbook, I'm going to go buy groceries. Like, wait a minute, I gotta put that back in next month. Well, do you want to eat? Well, yeah. And if it's in the case of property taxes, so you do that, you pay it once a year, you got to start putting that back in because you got to pay it next year and the following year. I mean, every year you're paying property taxes. So it all works the same. It's just that our minds are kind of more accustomed to, yeah, I understand I gotta pay the truck back because I'm using someone else's money. But again, now you're the bank and you are lending that money to your number one customer, which also happens to be you. You got to kind of pay yourself back, kind of in that banking concept, because you are the customer, you are the borrower, but you are also the banker, the lender. So you're kind of playing both roles. Again, it gets confusing, but you do that, like you said earlier, over time, all that money comes back to your family. What,
Yeah,
Dave?
and
I thought did you want to interject something there?
No, you
Or Tim?
you kind of slowed down
Did I-
on, so I just said uh-oh. So
Yeah.
you were lagging a little bit. Unless you got a
Oh,
stutter that you developed and we didn't know about. I
probably.
think it was lag.
Life in the country. I never have really good Wi-Fi for very long.
And you glitched out there, so I'm not positive I got the entire thought process or question, but I think where you're maybe headed there was just realizing that this is not this is really the way I think about it for me personally, and the way I can wrap my head around it is it literally is like a checkbook where you have to reload it. Like everything that's going through there, you have to put back in order for it to be there later on 20 years from now. So I think about, again, I hate to keep harping on the vacation idea, but for me, that's one that I can kind of wrap my head around as something other than, a consumable product. And I think, when you think like, okay, there's a few different ways to go about this. You can either take that, take the money that's in your shoebox and you can write a check to, the wherever Disneyland, and you don't really do that. You use some type of plastic card at this point. Very few people even know how to write a check probably anymore. There's that option. Money's left your family. Period. You can put that vacation on a card. Your That money's left your family. Period. Only in smaller chunks that end up costing you more because of the interest possibly. Or you can use a banking policy like we're talking about. You can pull that money aside while it still works for you, go on the vacation, and then pay it back as if it was on a card. Pay yourself some interest, put that money back so you've got that exact same money to use again next year if you want to go on a vacation again. Again, like a checkbook, you have to put the money in, take the money out, put the money back in, take the money out. You can use that, you can recycle that same money over and over. I think maybe you don't remember this, Mike, but I remember years ago talking with somebody that had some policies before us, and one of the things they did with their family is they kind of, arm wrestled or fought over who was going to pay for the vacation, because then they knew when they split it up, if that money was on their ledger, all their family members were going to pay them back. All that money's going in their policy. So they all had policies and they fought over who got to pay for this year's vacation. So, I mean, it's that
Right.
powerful.
Everybody
Well,
wants to be the banker.
Yep.
Well, I want to add something you said. I think it was last episode, Tim. But it's you spend the money going on that vacation as you would anyway. But the key difference between this and any checking account is that money stays on the ledger as if you had never gone on that vacation. That's the key distinction in all this. You continue to make uninterrupted exponential growth, and yet you get to use the money and go on that vacation as you would anyway. And to me, the investment mindset, this riding the traditional bike, that's the biggest hurdle I find people like. That doesn't make sense. One, it's too good to be true. Two, from my understanding, I mean, I'm a Tour de France rider. I'm very good at this finance stuff. I can ride a bike real well. That makes no sense. And I say, I agree, but that's how this works. So it is a checkbook, but the key distinction is that money stays on the ledger. We can use any word. That's just the word I tend to use, but it stays there making money as if you never went on that vacation. And then, like Mike and Tim are saying, you pay yourself back to decrease what we call the drag on it. But then you just cash flow that thing, and that ledger continues to grow. And we're talking money in your family for generations if it's done correctly. So I just wanted to kind of maybe say the same thing in a different way. That was my goal. So again, I'm sorry to commandeer, but I wanted to try and get it out there.
Yeah, and I think, a couple things. You're right on the money, and we, I don't know if I even said, like, at the end of that 20 years, 30 years, you've got every single vacation's worth of money in an account that you can continue to use and go on vacations, and use as your family's checkbook, as we've talked about. One of the other thing that I don't know if we talk about often enough is, especially potentially in younger years, and as you're getting going in this, the other thing that these policies kind of do they're not necessarily designed for the max death benefit. They're more designed for the max banking capability. But one of the accidental really good benefits here is that, if something happens to you, your family's taken care of because you've got a death benefit in this. And that's something that you just, you think about a CD or mutual fund or another way to, to potentially hold on to some money and make it work for you. They don't have that. I mean, if something happens to you, 5 years down the road, they're going to get the contents of that, account, whichever you've chosen to put that money in, where here you have a significant death benefit.
Yeah. It's a windfall for your
Yeah.
family. There's a peace of mind to it. So sorry, Mike, I
Mhm.
cut you off. Go for it.
No, I mean, I was just gonna kind of continue what Tim was saying there. That yeah, it's a guaranteed wealth plan, guaranteed. So as an example, let's take interest and everything out of it, just to make it real simple. Okay, we're just going to store money, under our mattress, and we're going to put $10,000 a year in for 50 years, and at the end of 50 years, we're going to have $500,000. Correct? So my goal is I'm going to put $10,000 a year in for 50 years, and then at the end of that, I'm going to leave $500,000 for my boys, my beneficiary, my wife, whoever, my family. Okay, that's saving. Again, forget about interest. I know you can get 6%, 4% pre-tax, after tax, the yin, the yang, whatever. Forget all that. Just look at just straight cash value, no time value of money. Okay. So let's say that person dies 5 years in of that 50 years. Okay. They're hit by a drunk driver. They only have $50,000 in their safe, 10 years or 10,000 for 5 years, right? Well, their family's only going to get $50,000 because they didn't complete their wealth plan. They died 45 years too early, right? However, that same person that puts $10,000 a year in for $500,000, if they die in year one, in week one, their family doesn't get $10,000. They get the 500,000, meaning the 10,000 being the premium that's inside the whole life policy that's guaranteed the 500,000. So it's a guaranteed legacy that no matter what happens when you start this, when you die, not if, when you die, whether it's premature or whether you live to be 150, well, they'll pay it out before 150. They'll pay it out at year 121. But anyway, I mean, it's a guaranteed wealth plan that when you compare side by side, there's really just no comparison with the tax advantages and the guarantee side of it. Should something happen, it's just, this doesn't even take into account the banking function that we've been discussing. So.
Well, we got about 8 minutes left. So, Tim, I want to kind of finish up with one question. You said you've listened to every episode. What has been maybe a nugget that you can pull out of something that Mike and I stumbled upon that made any sense at all, or that has helped you, or that you've been able to communicate to somebody else? What's been helpful in the podcast that maybe we can draw back out and reiterate in another way?
Oh man, you got me on the spot.
Well, I'm just, yeah, and I certainly didn't mean to put you on the spot. But is there
Yeah,
something,
no.
maybe an analogy or an example that resonated with you, or a specific episode? You mentioned Melissa. Let's go there. What resonated with you in the Melissa episode that you remember that one? I mean, you remember her name. What resonated with you?
Yeah, and I think what resonated with me there was that, and I mentioned it, the shame around money. I think there's a lot of judgment that, whether that's from, family and friends, or whether that's, internal. I think we do that to ourselves in a lot of cases, and that hit me, particularly, and sort of, where we all started, or where we started this last episode, and going through what we went through, and having a mountain of debt that we needed to get through. That, that, just that sentence that she said about, shame around, where you're at, that hit me pretty hard. And it I felt like she was, speaking to me personally, and this, just realizing to, to give yourself some grace, and realize that this isn't a competition, and just as long as today's better than yesterday, we're doing just fine. I mean, that's all that really matters, is just, continue to get better, and educate yourself, and do what you can to, put your family in a little bit better position than they were in yesterday.
Man, you ended it perfectly because you pulled a Mike Stevens. My next question was, what would be your encouragement based on what resonated with you? And Mike is infamous on this podcast, Tim, for stealing my thunder. And you didn't even let me ask my great question to end the podcast. You just went ahead and answered it. So, just like last time, I think that's the perfect way to end. Give yourself some grace. Mike's smiling because he encourages me that way all the time. Dave, give yourself some grace. I feel like I should know this stuff by now, but I need to take my own advice. I need to take Tim's advice. I would encourage you as the listener or the watcher to do the same. Ask some questions. Let's work through some things together. If I don't know the answer, if Mike doesn't know the answer, if Tim doesn't know the answer, we have resources to find the answer. The whole joy in this for us is to help people walk through the journey and find out how IBC fits into what you're doing. It can. Tim's a testament to it. His story is a powerful one, and how he came into it and how their family has utilized it. So start your own powerful story, and we'll move forward. So we're running out of time, gentlemen. Is there anything real quick for the good of the cause that you want to end on? Anything? All right, we'll wrap it up. Mike's still working on our theme song. So that's from a couple episodes ago. It's in the making. We've got lots of requests for that, right, Mike? People are anxious. But if you joined in again and made it to the end here, thank you for doing so. Our phone number is 507-205-2284. My email is dave@familybankingsolutions.com. Mike's is mike@familybankingsolutions.com. Tim, a sincere thank you. Hopefully have you on again soon. I got another one in mind. We've kind of already talked about it. I'd like to talk and discuss with you. So hopefully we can find that coming to fruition sooner rather than later.
That sounds good. I really appreciate you guys having me on again. This has been awesome.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it's fun. Mike gets sick of me.
Yeah.
Every time we end, he lets me know. So it's really nice to have some new blood on the podcast. So tempers it a little bit. But no, if you're listening, thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next one.